Today's headline is Major Holland of Galveston. The subheadline says, His Tale, the Living Lariat, and the Serpent Guides to Death. It says, when Major Holland of Galveston, proprietor of the Texas Farm and Ranch, was in New York not long ago, he left with the boys many startling chapters in his personal experiences on the border. But none of them is likely to last so long in the memory of those who are to narrate it, or is calculated to lift Texan veracity to so high a notch as the Major's tale of himself, the living Lariat, and his ride over the plain, escorted by a detachment of deadly serpents. The Great Plains of Texas, said Major Holland at the time he told this story, are strewn with snakes, almost as are the northern forests with leaves in autumn. Long snakes, short snakes, thick snakes, thin snakes, snakes that whistle, snakes that bellow like a bull, snakes with horns on their heads, snakes with horns on their tails, red snakes, white snakes, blue snakes, green snakes, black snakes, yellow snakes, snakes that are red and white, snakes that are red, white, and blue, snakes that are red, white, blue, and green, snakes that are red, white, blue, green, and black, snakes that are red, white, blue, green, black, and yellow, snakes that can turn any color they choose, snakes that you never see, only when it thunders, fast snakes, slow snakes, savage snakes, with poison enough to kill an Apache Indian in his tracks with one dip of it, and snakes as gentle and harmless as the zephyrs that play on the prairie grass. But of all the snakes in my beloved Texan plains, the living Lariat and the guide to death, as the fiery marked pilot is called, is the most interesting. If there's one animate thing that approaches nearer to lightning in rapidity of motion than another, it's the living Lariat. It grows to be 10 feet long, but is so slim that it could be likened to a whiplash in appearance more than anything else. It's of a light yellow color, and flashes along on the ground in a zigzag course, passing by you and disappearing in a yellow streak in the distance so quickly that if you had never seen one before, you would have no idea what it was that had swept by you. The plainsmen fear the snake more than they do the rattler, and that's saying a good deal. The strength and constricting powers of the living Lariat are almost beyond belief. It delights to pursue the swift-footed rabbits of the Texas plains, and if you should see one of these animals bounding by you, its eyes big and projecting with terror, and every nerve and muscle strained to get somewhere as quickly as possible, you may know that a living Lariat is on its trail. Presently, a yellow streak will whiz past. It's the living Lariat. The snake then overhauls the rabbit, but does not capture it by seizing it with its mouth. When it's near enough to its victim, the serpent hurls its tail, and 9/10 of its whiplash body forward, winds a roll about the poor rabbit's neck, and brings it down as unerringly as the most expert rancher would throw his lasso around the neck of a steer. The next instant, the rabbit is lying within the folds of the snake, crushed into a shapeless mass, and ready for the reptile's slow and easy dinner. If the living Lariat confined itself to chasing rabbits and using its fatal lasso on them, nobody would find any fault with it. But it lassos sheep and even cattle, and worse still, it lies in wait and lassos human beings passing by. A man living near the Mexican border thought he was smart once and reared as a pet a living Lariat that he had caught when it was young. The snake grew to a tremendous length and was the pride of its owner. Even after it had thinned out his sheep flock by lassoing and killing a dozen lambs or more, and actually roped and strangled to death his most valuable herd dog, this man still held the snake in favor. He laughed at the warnings of his friends, who declared that he would be sorry for it someday if he didn't slay that wicked serpent. One day, the man's wife heard a smothered cry, followed by a gurgling sound coming from the direction where she had seen her husband passing along a moment before. She ran out of the house and saw her husband hanging at the end of something from the limb of a tree, struggling convulsively. She hurried to the spot and was horrified to see that he had been lassoed by his pet living Lariat, which was up the tree and had raised him 2 feet from the ground. The wife cut her husband down by severing the snake with a sickle, but she was too late. The snake had finished its foolish master. It was just about the time that this unwise fellow citizen of mine had fallen victim to his pet living Lariat that I was on a business trip among the ranchmen down that way. I was riding leisurely along one day, bound for a ranch some 10 miles distant. I had traveled about 3 miles and was so lost in admiration of the incomparable beauties and advantages of Texas that I hadn't noticed that my horse had left the trail and was bearing off to the left. I pulled on the bridle to turn him back to the trail, but he refused to respond to it, much to my surprise. Just then, I glanced down to the ground, and I was surprised no longer. On my right, crowding close to the horse's feet, were 4 snakes. 2 more were on my left. Straight ahead of the horse was another, leading the way. A red stripe down the back of each, from head to tail, and one down each side, with brilliant markings between them in shape exactly like the zigzag representations of lightning flashes, told me what they were, and why my horse had left the trail. If he hadn't left it, he would have dropped dead in it before he had gone many rods further. A detachment of pilots had come to escort him and me in the direction they wanted us to go. The horses and cattle of Texas know these serpents instinctively. When they come along and cut off a steer from a herd, and the leader of the snakes moves away, the steer will follow. It knows that if it tries to go in any other direction, the pilots that are guarding it on either side will sock it full of poison only too quick. Horses know the same thing. So there I was, under escort of these tireless and unrelenting guides to death. It isn't exactly clear where these pilots take the victims that they surround in this way. But as it is well known that they are close and particular friends and devoted bodyguards of the bloated rattlesnake of the Staked Plains, it is believed that they run their captives down to that delectable part of Texas and turn them over to the pleasure of those terrible serpents. Cattle do not know where they are being taken, but they do know what will happen to them if they don't go along. So you can't urge a Texas horse by whip or spur out of the deadly circle of these pilot escorts. You might open on the serpents with your gun, but you couldn't kill more than one at a time. And at the first fire, all that were left would be on top of your horse and yourself so quick that you wouldn't have time to breathe twice. That's what I've heard the ranchmen say 100 times, and they tell lots of their comrades who went riding on the plains and never came back. Pilots is all they'll say if you ask why. So, knowing all this, I sat still and rode with my deadly escorts ahead of me, to the right of me, to the left of me, and behind me. I soon saw that we were headed for the Staked Plains. It was sure death to try to escape, and doubtless sure death if I didn't. But there was more hope in not trying to, so I rode on, guided by deadly serpents toward death. I guess we had traveled for half an hour, when our course took us into a little grove. We had just got fairly into it, when I saw a quick flash of yellow light, and felt a sudden shortening of my wind. The next instant, I was jerked out of my saddle and was swinging in the air, held suspended by something that was gradually tightening around my body and squeezing the life out of me. It didn't take me long to know what had happened to me. I had been roped by a living lariat from its ambush in the tree. I knew very well that the lariat hadn't yanked me out of the saddle to save me from the pilots, and was trying to think out how it was going to benefit me to be squeezed to death instead of being poisoned, when I discovered commotion among my serpent escorts on the ground below me. The whole detachment had gathered together, and first thing I knew, they were flashing up that tree trunk like jets of a flame. They pounced on what there was of the living lariat in the tree, and in less than 10 seconds, its coils loosened on me, and I tumbled to the ground. I paused there just long enough to notice that the fight going on between that living lariat and the pilots was more fiery than the most startling piece of 4th of July pyrotechnics I had ever seen. Then I made one jump and landed on my horse, for he had stopped under the tree, as much amazed as I was. The instant I lit on his back, away he went. I looked back only once. The serpentine fireworks were still on exhibition in the grove. I never knew how the fight came out, but it will be a long time before I forget. I don't believe there's another man in Texas who can say that he was saved from pilots by a living lariat, and then from the living lariat by pilots. Yes, there is, said Farmer Joe Bush of Printing-House Square, but I don't believe there's another one who would. This story came from the great state of New York, being reported in the Sun of September 2nd, 1894. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.